You can share a screen now. Sorry. Once you can share a screen.
Yeah, just 2 seconds. Good evening, everyone. You are welcome to this presentation. My name is Moses Dang, and I'll be talking in the next few minutes about the history and culture of Pan people. Now, the Pan people are found in Kwanpan local government. I'm sure you've heard of Kwanpan local government. Kwanpan has 2 major ethnic groups, Kwan and Pan. Kwan is the section of the local government, or a section that is an extension of the present Shandam local government, and Pan are the other major ethnic group that make up Kwanpan local government. Pan people are otherwise called the descendants of the Fiar. The Fiar migrated and eventually settled atop the hills in the present-day Kofiar. Kofiar is an area in the local government. Kofiar actually comprised of 3 different tribes as designated by British colonial officers. Dumak, which is otherwise called Dumak. I'll explain that later on. We have the Merniang, and we have also the Kuala. The 3 groups have common language, economic pattern, and origin and myth, which had formed into a union that is called the Kofiar Federation. So the Fiar's offspring, when he descended and settled atop the hills of Southern Plateau, they continued to migrate in search for arable land into the plains below the hill, and they settled in various areas, including the present-day Doka and Kwa, which is the settlements of one of the major Kofiar's tribe, which is the Mernyang tribe. And so one of his children got tired at a certain location and declared Dumak, which is presently called the Dumak, and that is the headquarters of Kwanpan local government, is present Dumak, or in Bab, as you will hear some call it. And Dumak means the journey is enough. That's in the local dialect. And that formed the basis of the present day local government. Now, beneath the hill, colonial records actually indicate that our ancestors lived in a rugged hill, which is the southeast corner of Plateau, and in settlements around the base. And this particular hill that you're looking at in your background picture is called the Panfier, which has served as the base and the refuge for so many of the Fiar's children during their inter-ethnic clash and all of that. And they were subjugated by the colonials, and they're referred to as largely non-violent. So the people that settled in the present-day Dimak, the present-day Kwa, and later on the current Namu area, which is called Jebjan, one of the twins of the Fiar's children, they are largely peaceful people. When we look at their culture particularly, we have social institutions which are instrumental to the sustainability of the nation and our hierarchical leadership structure. So currently, Dimak has a long Dimak, which is the district head of Dimak, and he has a lot of the part of the leadership structure that are answerable to the long Dimak. We have the Dangtigam, the Kangyil, the Gibo, the Yalta, Katun, Kangler, Nuang, and the Long Latok. these are all leaders that form part of the council within the chiefs in Dimak. Now, the Long Dimak is answerable to Longpan, who is the traditional leader of the entire Kwanpan local government as it is. So the people of Dimak and the Pan Cultural Day, these are the major traditional celebrations that the people celebrate. They highly engage in intensive agriculture as their major occupation, and also they participate in annual cultivation of farmlands and animal husbandry, and they also participate in trades such as the blacksmith. We have the metal works, they are hunting, and also trading and fishing as part of their major occupation. We also have our most popular staple foods that you may have known and have heard. Our major agricultural products is at the top left corner of your screen. We produce yam. The next after it, you can see women pounding yam. At the top right-hand side of your screen, we have what we call the nawe. Nawe is part of our popular food that is made from bambara nuts, and it is grounded and produced into a staple food, very strong. It's more like the akpu that people have it, and we call it the 24-hour meal. And part of also the food that we produce, we have at the bottom of your screen, we have the ukswa, and the ukswa is made from guinea corn. Just like you produce rice and you cook it into jollof, the ukswa is the guinea corn, which is a major product of our people, and they cook it into what is called, instead of jollof rice, you have jollof guinea corn. That is what it's called. And it is cooked with ingredients. At the bottom left of your screen, you have part of the display of the food that our people produce as well. So here, as part of the agricultural products, our people engaged in farming guinea corn, the popular black-eyed beans, we have cassava, we have the bambara nut, we have the peanut, we have olive, we have guinea corn, and also palm oil. Our people are majorly known for producing palm kernels that are later on processed into what we call, what we all know as palm oil. Here you have the traditional attire of the people of Dimak, and generally within all the three major ethnic groups that make up the Pan Nation. And in terms of tourism, we have the Pandam Game Reserve, which attracts a diverse collection of exotic animals and plants within Pandam. And we also have the Latok waterfalls, which is also located in Dimak. And that waterfall slowly runs all year round. So in terms of tourism, that's what we have. And I'm going to show you a little video of the traditional dances that our people are generally known for. That's quite similar to some ethnic groups within Southern Plateau and Central Plateau as well. So I'll just play the video in just a minute. Another very popular traditional dance is a step dance. Thank you very much. So that is a brief snippet of the history and culture of the people of Pan, who are descendants of Dafir, the present day Kwanpan local government, the Pan area of Kwanpan local government. Thank you for listening.
You introduce the speaker?
Okay, 2 seconds. So we will go into the next session, which is the main presentation for today. And it is a singular honor and privilege to introduce Professor Chukwunonso ECC Ejike, who is a professor of medical biochemistry at the Alex Ekweme Federal University, Ndufu, Alike, in Ebonyi State. Professor Ejike researched topics that are relevant to clinical nutrition and the dynamics of disease of the metabolic syndrome. He has won a number of grants, fellowships, and prizes for his scientific and creative writing activities. Professor Ejike has published copiously in some of the best journals in the field. He is currently the Dean School of Postgraduate Studies at the Alex Ekweme Federal University, Ndufu, Alike, in Ebonyi State. I believe you will all join me as we welcome Professor Chukwunonso Ejike. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope I can be heard.
Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
Okay, so I bring you greetings, Umoy small town. Yeah, like we've all been told, the topic today's presentation on the subsequent discourses on the ethical production and deposition. I intend to go through some ethics in publishing, or perish, publish and perish. Personal examples, and then conclude. So the outline is as I've just presented, and I'll go into the meat of the matter with some definitions. Now, research is simply a systematic method of acquiring new knowledge. And I like the definition presented by the Department of Education and Training, Austin City University. They say research is defined as the creation of new knowledge and or the use of existing knowledge in a new and creative way, so as to generate concepts, methodologies, and understandings. And this could include the synthesis, analysis, research to the extent that it is important to underscore that research has done something that is entirely be engaged in researching into be looking at certain knowns from the prism of finding out if it is possible to throw some new light. For example, someone who engages in systematic review of the literature may well be engaged in some kind of research. Now, academic publishing, according to Wikipedia, is a subfield of publishing which distributes academic research and scholarship. So when one has done some scientific work, some research work, then it is not a publication. It is also academic, that is not born out of research. That will be a publication, but not an academic publication. So whereas all publications are not research papers all research papers are publications. I found a definition of ethics by the BBC. It's very interesting. The BBC says that at its simplest, ethics is a system of moral principles. They affect how people make decisions and lead their lives. From the Oxford English Dictionary, we find that ethics refers to a set of moral principles, especially ones relating to or affirming a specified group, field, or form of conduct. So if you see researchers as a specific group, then ethics in research will be dealing with a set of moral principles that apply to research. The only, the welfare of mankind and for the generations, yet unborn. And this is typically done through the pursuit of truth. So researchers who strive to be ethical, who live up to the ethical requirements, necessarily therefore need to insist on telling and preserving through their work the truth, the whole truth, but the truth. I know this will sound a little lawyerly, but that's the bottom line. It's about telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this ethics in research, one doesn't really need to go far to find out if what he's doing or she's doing is, all you need is just pass it through the 3 points here. Is it the truth? For example, from a point of, what you are presenting, is it truly what you found? Is it the whole truth? For example, is there something you found presenting because you think it will undermine the conclusion you want to push forward? And then, is there something that was not found in the course of doing the research that you have added, maybe to embellish it or to make it sound nice or to make it sound, that underscores ethics in research. A lack of research ethics would lead to research misconduct. Research misconduct will include falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. And these 3 occur in proposing the research work, performing the research work, reviewing it, or even reporting the research results. At all 4 stages, a researcher who has lost sight of research ethics in falsification, fabrication, or plagiarism. Now, fabrication means making up data or results and recording or reporting them. That is, reporting what is not, what was not found. For example, a young man studying blood pressure, who wants to publish in a big journal, and they will only accept data if your sample population is up to 50,000. But the young man has only sampled 500 people. And then he decides to multiply his 500 by 100 by simply recording whatever values he has and pretending he studied 50,000 people. Would have engaged in data fabrication because he actually has data for 500 and would have fabricated data, for 49,500. Falsification means manipulating, research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results in a way to make the result appear better than it is, or to portray a certain image that is not supported by the data. So in falsification, for example, a gentleman or lady who has, studied the performance of children in education, in history, after taking a lecture by a certain professor of education history, may realize that the students, the empirical data may suggest that after being taught by the professor, the students performed worse than they performed when they were taught by a graduate assistant. The researcher, being a senior lecturer due for promotion, may be uncomfortable to report that the professor's teaching outcomes were worse. And therefore, even though he had done the study and collected data, may decide to switch the group that ordinarily should be the class taught by the professor for that taught by the graduate assistant. That would be a case of falsification. Plagiarism, on the other hand, means the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credits. Plagiarism is a little more complicated because my experience is that people think that once you've cited a reference, then you haven't plagiarized. So people copy another person's words, copy an entire paragraph, and then reference the author and think they haven't plagiarized the author. No, that's still plagiarism. You're not allowed to use another person's words. I think it should be not beyond 8 words. The idea is that people are expected to do what we were taught in secondary school. It should be about reading and comprehension. You read what the person has said, you report it in your own words, and then you cite the appropriate reference. I must mention here that research misconduct does not include honest error or difference of opinion. For example, you may have, in the course of writing a paper, omitted the mention of an author who had worked on that paper a few months before you, simply because you were not aware that the paper existed. That's an honest error. It's different from you knew the paper existed, but you refused to make, to make allusions, as it were, to discuss the paper, simply because the author's opinion differed from yours, and then you pretended it didn't exist. That's not an honest, error. Okay, so when it comes to publishing, researchers typically communicate to one another through publications. Like you would find in research ethics, ethical publishing requires, again, telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Advances in knowledge occur in such a manner that it's about building the body of knowledge step by step, brick by brick, one block at a time. Indeed, there's a common saying that differences in opinion when it comes to research is not resolved by the one who shouts the most. For those of us in the sciences, your opinion will stand simply by virtue of the fact that subsequent experiments are able to be built on yours. For example, when Watson and Crick described the structure of the DNA and even proposed that the DNA could be, would replicate by a semi-conservative means. The reason we believe it today is because subsequent experiments, with genetic engineering and all that, are able to build on what they have described. Assuming they had described it and people believe them and subsequent experiments are not able to support it, it will collapse. And that's why, science, for example, it's an interesting field that is self-correcting and is able to, to keep growing incrementally. So if researchers lie about their work in their publications, then those who try to build their experiments on theirs would not only be wasting their time and their resources, but could actually be spending energy in the wrong direction, and that could slow down the advancement, of knowledge. And that's why it's important for scientists to state it exactly as it is. And for those of us in the life sciences, one of the challenges we have is that people almost never report negative results. Each time you go to examine an undergraduate project reports, a master's, PhD thesis or dissertation, the reports are always negative. So it's as though once they identify a certain plant, and then the hypothesis is that this plant has certain types of properties, then it will eventually have it. And when a student dares to report that, my data analysis shows that my hypothesis my alternate hypothesis or the null hypothesis needs to be rejected, people think that the person hasn't done enough. And so you find a case where people struggle, as it were, to show that whatever hypothesis they had formulated, the conclusion eventually supports it. That's a typical case of a lack of ethics in both research and in publishing. Consequently, misconduct when it happens actually hurts research quite severely. Sorry, there's this fly that appears to be enjoying this presentation more than I am, but that's okay. Ethical standards for publications, exist. Some high quality research is put out in the right order, and that way research findings and people receive credit for their work and for years. If you have time, it would be good Committee on Publishing Ethics, the World Association of Medical Editors, and the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. The not-for-profit groups, very copious literature on ethics, especially with research. And they advise both authors and editors, about what to do and how to recognize some of these things. Now, authorship is one matter that resolves disputes and could lead to misconduct. Though the definition of authorship, an author is generally considered who has made a significant intellectual contribution to the study. Now, the matter that could be subject to contestation is a significant intellectual contribution. If experiments and to simply carry out the laboratory work and to me, and I perform the data analysis, interpret the data, and then write the manuscript. Is that technician an author? Has the technician made an intellectual contribution? So the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors insists that there are certain conditions that must be made before authorship can be claimed. There are 4 of them. Sorry, the numbering is 4. I stopped at 3. There should be, the last one is number 4. Okay. 1 is that the person should make substantial contributions to the conception and design, data acquisition or analysis, and interpretation of the data. The second one is that the person should have in drafting or revising the manuscript critically for intellectual content. What this means is that simple language editing doesn't end authorship. It has to be the kind of editing that improves the intellectual content of the work. The third is the final approval of the version to be published. Most journals will insist that all authors approve the final version, to be published. The last is related to the third, and that is agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of that work. Implicit in this is that once you are listed as an author on a paper, you will earn credits for that paper. But if something goes wrong, you will also pay a price for that paper. Now, publish or perish. Publish or perish has become some cliche. The idea is that because universities are typically faced with the 3-pronged task of research, teaching, community development, teaching, research, and community development, and it's given that a researcher's teaching should be driven by the person's research, work. And indeed, that's the difference between a university professor and a secondary school teacher or a primary school teacher. A university teacher to allow his research impact on his teaching. The research also informs the community development activities of the researcher in question. Their research for academics, for university teachers, is at the center of the work they do. Both the teaching and the community service are informed by their research. And that premium universities place on research, especially when it comes to promotions. Unfortunately, that also is the genesis of this publish or perish thing. It is because in the university, in Nigeria, for example, the system is designed in such that almost everyone will be able to get to senior lecturer. Not everyone will go through and get to professor. And in negotiating that 2009 agreement, ASU was careful to make sure that the senior lecturer cadre has, I think, up to 15 steps. In fact, a senior lecturer at bar earns as much as a freshly minted professor. However, because we live in a society that enjoys titles, it now appears that everyone, and why not, needs to get promoted to professor. Those who are not particularly good researchers, who are more gifted as teachers, in order to become professors, are under pressure, as it from within, to publish papers. In order to either get placements, promotion, or even to win grant, people are under pressure to publish. This wrong emphasis, especially on quantity, instead of then leads to all sorts, research and publishing conducts. And here I have this interesting report from Elmer. When I read, in 1958, when D. Watson worked his way up to the rank of associate professor at Harvard. So Francis Crick, where the people his way up to the rank of associate professor at Harvard. The young biochemist had on his curriculum vitae only 18 papers. And one of them, published 5 years, the deoxyribonucleic acid. Today, you will agree with me that even here in Nigeria, facing promotion to the rank of senior lecturer who have only 15 papers, who have only 18 papers, would actually feel quite inadequate because of the premium that quantity instead of quality. If now leads many people to data supply. A gentleman or lady has one paper, but because he needs 10 papers on his CV, he sits down, sometimes with his supervisor, sometimes alone, and breaks these data into, where, slices what would very meaningful, papers. After working on a certain disease, showing that a certain plant material is capable of helping people survive a certain disease. In this case, he was using animal models. In reporting it, then listed all the parameters he studied and published them as one paper. So you'd have, for example, effect of Venonia amygdalina on blood glucose, and that's one paper. Effect of Venolia amygdalina on high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, another paper. Effect of Venolia amygdalina, and I'm sure those of you in the sciences can relate to this. Everything now is effect of, effect of, effect of, effect of. And typically, you'll be able to look at this and realize that these 8 or more paper. Now, the practice is that it get the information you should have obtained from one paper of, let's say, 50 pages, you would then have to read of the 10 pages of petitions suggested that the journals should stop publishing papers, but simply publish their table of contents. And then when people make requests for any table of contents, then they can send the paper to whoever it is. The other one is duplicate a paper, reporting whatever it is. Today we heard about the history of one of the ethnic groups, on the platform. So you report it as their history, and in the next paper, you report it as their custom. And in another paper, you report it as challenges on foreign cultures. But essentially, you are reporting exactly the same thing, the same data set, the same population, the same everything. There are also redundant publications. Here, you're not telling anything new, quite related to the case of the publication. But it's a case of, in this case, the piece, and then you repeat the same work, redundant, because you're not adding anything new, to the body of knowledge. The other one is falsification and fabric earlier, and won't bother dealing with them again. These ones constitute research misconduct arising from the to survive the academia, as it were. The other ones are what in Nigeria we call put my name. The case of gifts, guests, and ghost authorship. These will form a publication authorship is a case where someone has done nothing at all, with respect to the work that has been done. But that because he is the supervisor of the editor-in-chief of the journal you want to publish your paper in, that if you list, then the editor-in-chief will be reluctant to reject a paper with his supervisor's name. Or you're looking for a job in the Department of Biochemistry, Plateau State University, and you hear that a certain Dr. Biochemistry is the head of the department. So you list his name on a paper, even though he has nothing to that paper. And then you hope that when he sees this your gift of a paper, he would speak to the vice chancellor of your case. When it's about the guest author is a case of someone who again has anything significant. Possibly you have your supervisor, who, even though he was your supervisor, bring a certain project topic, didn't do much. Sometimes you asked you for money so you could approve chapter 1 or chapter 2. And then eventually, when you publish the paper, you think he will get angry if you don't list him as an author, even when you're sure he's done nothing to earn authorship. You also have ghost authorship. Here, there have been cases in the literature where pharmaceutical companies pay to write papers of properly conducted research. Very much, where ethics were followed, really. The research is good, it is sound, but they want the research promoted. So they want the name of a certain big man in the industry, a certain of pharmacology or toxicology or whatever it is, and right, and the man, becomes the author of the paper, So there is also a reverse for ghost authorship. The reverse is a junior colleague of yours on this work, has earned authorship. But because you're going for promotion, you want to be single author on the paper, you don't list this colleague's name. You publish the paper knowing very well that the colleague is helpless. That's the other side of ghost authorship. And at this point, I'll ask a few questions. One, have you, these are things you should reflect on. Have you ever been tempted to, report one study in 4 different ways simply because you want to have number? Have you ever had an opportunity where a colleague of yours bought you beer, maybe even offered to pay the article processing fees for journals that charge article processing, fees, so that you list him as an? Have you even had situations where, they come to you as maybe someone who shares their faith? My brother, in Christianity or in Islam or in whatever religion, and then ask you to help. Catholics would know that there's this thing about the corporal works of mercy, one of which is helping those in need. Have you been under such pressure to help those in need? Or have you been in a situation where of yours, or maybe even your students, has done the work, and then you list your name as first author, and then not list the other person at all, or even when you list him, sandwich his name somewhere in the middle, and then have your friends in a long list of authors, even when they've done nothing. These are everyday examples of how people engage in misconduct, with this pressure, to publish or perish. Now, publish and perish is a glass ball. Ethics is a glass ball. And by that I mean, if you let yours fall, it will break to pieces. You would never be able to mend it. Even if you put it together, you looks at it, will know that this glass ball was broken some time ago. If you have problems with ethics, take it from me, your colleagues will most likely never. You'll be remembered. The luck that people have in our part of the world is that the work we do are usually close to where matters are contentious. So not many people are interested in building on what we've done, and therefore some with blue murder. But assuming we get a little, and then we also have people, many of us publishing in the gray literature. By gray literature, I mean, those publication outlets that one clearly knows, peer review and publication protocol that, journal publication is known for. When colleagues get with research misconduct because of the pressure of publish or perish, they will end up. But colleagues know when people gain promotion through unorthodox means or through favors or corrupt, will know. So you may have gained the promotion, you may have survived, but you may have also been perishing gradually. You have any engagement with them, we'll very quickly Google your name. Indeed, I have a colleague who had traveled to the UK for doctoral studies. And the first day he met with his supervisor, the supervisor asked him the name of his master's degree supervisor. And then he met, and the supervisor simply checked him out using endnotes and found 2 publications. So the supervisor asked him, did you say this man is a professor? He said, oh yeah, he's been a professor for the last 10 to 12 years. And the supervisor then asked him, so why are you not a professor? Because this time had 4 publications that the supervisor could find on endnotes. So if you have 4 publications on endnotes, and the supervisor who has been a professor for the last 12 years, has only 1, why are you? So when serious-minded people deal with us, they will look us up. And so irrespective of our titles, when they look you up, they place you in a certain place. In fact, in 2015, I was writing for a certain someone wrote me back and said, I don't have time for African professors who have nothing to show for it. Much later, when I met the man in Germany, I had discussions with him on the subject, and I sincerely can connect with his pains. People can get away with research, misconduct today, but not on COVID-19 alone. On COVID-19 alone, there are more than 124 retractions already. More than 124 retractions already, and you may simply go to, and see some of these cases. If your paper is retracted because of misconduct, you will struggle to come out from it. People will deal with you with a long, long spoon. Sometime in 2019, I decided to take on a task. The National Universities Commission publishes a list of professors within the Nigerian university system periodically. Many times, lately it's been annually. In 2019, I took pains to search for the authors, for the professor using Scopus. And there'll be no point about the results. I'm sure you can guess. It's painful that many professors remain anonymous even after gaining elevation. And there are many universities in Nigeria today that are struggling with how to rein in, these kinds of misconduct. At the Alex Ekwueme Federal University in Dufalike, in 2015, the university developed guidelines for the promotion of academic staff. And that guideline is such that it is possible to become a professor at the Alex Ekwueme Federal University in Dufalike, 10 to 15 publications. And it's also possible to have 100 publications and not be promoted even to senior lecturer. The guidelines was deliberately designed to place premium on quality instead of quantity. But also, the guideline was also designed to encourage people to collaborate and publish good quality papers. Unfortunately, in the course of implementing these guidelines, colleagues, because of the pressure to publish, perish, began to engage in conducts that are clearly unethical, misconducts. So you began to see cases of people publishing a paper, and you have an author who is in the sciences, another who is in education, another who is in management science, another who is in the humanities, and one who is in engineering. And the title of the paper is something about microeconomics. Now, whereas there is no problem with interdisciplinary research, for the purposes of gaining promotion, one will expect that you will publish papers in your area of, let's say, medical biochemistry. You will not be promoted professor of medical biochemistry with papers published in economics, even though there is nothing wrong in a staff of the Department of Biochemistry researching economic matters. But those will not be used to promote you if you're going to be promoted in the Department of Biochemistry, for example. And so, early this year, the Council of the University revised the guidelines to then insist that these publications must be in your area of specialization and that a certain percentage must be in your area of specialization and that you have to be first author in some of those papers. So it's not a case of people putting your name somewhere in the middle. And colleagues didn't take that very, very lightly. It was such that eventually the council had to give colleagues some more time to get adjusted, as it were, to being able to publish papers in their areas of specialization. And I will tell some of my friends, that certain victories are Pyrrhic victories. It is possible, and it is happening, that people publish, and instead of avoiding perishing, they perish. Research is needed. I'm concluding now, and I'll then look at the other matters when the questions start coming in. research is needed to advance society. To achieve this objective, it must be produced and deposited ethically. Those who produce and deposit knowledge unethically may publish and survive today, but will soon realize that they have published and perished. I have a few resources here that you may want to go to later. May your enzymes remain optimally regulated. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Ejike. Dr. Moses, you can continue for the next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ejike. That was quite an enriching presentation. We will take a few questions at the moment. And colleagues who have been listening, if you have any question that you like Professor Ejike to respond to, you can either indicate by raising up your hand, and then you'll be unmuted. You'll be given the chance to ask your question, or you like to type it in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to read your question. So at the moment, there's one question which I believe the Prof actually dealt with it when you were talking about the issue of gift and ghost authorship. There was a question about, asking how can we deal with gifts authorship. Although you've dealt with it in your presentation, Prof, but would you like to add one or two comments on that as well?
Okay. Thank you. Yes. With gifts authorship, all moral is complex and challenging. One is that individuals involved need to understand authorship criteria, truly are, so that you can have a sensible, knowledge-driven discussion about it. If, for example, someone has not contributed at all to the work you're doing, simply, wants to be part of that work when it's about publishing, you can tell the person very nicely that, well, don't worry, we have another study we are planning, you can join us on that. But sometimes these things are a little easier to say them than when it comes to implementation. For example, you could have a situation where your supervisor, after supervising your MSc, for example, and wants to become dean of the faculty. And then the man who is likely going to be his stumbling block needs a paper for promotion. And the supervisor tells you after writing up your paper that, hey, we need to add the name of XYZ to that paper. You could be between the rock and a hard thing if you said no. Okay, so it's some kind of ethical reorientation that needs all of us, so that one, as supervisors, we teach our students, our mentees, what the right ethical practices are, and also provide support for them in a manner that enables them resist the pressures to be engaged, to engage in unethical practices. By that I mean, if your mentee knows that if he says no to a certain unethical request made of him, that the supervisor will stand by him, the mentee's chances of behaving well, is higher. I must mention, however, that people don't behave well simply because they know what is right or wrong. There is some degree of inner conviction that is required for people to, for example, people don't steal because they don't know that the punishment for stealing is a couple of months in jail, right? So it's about continuing, to preach the message. At the Alex Ekwueme Federal University in Ufalike this year, we decided that we would have a compulsory course, for our postgraduate students on research ethics. The idea is, as it were, to catch them young, to show them early on the do's and the don'ts, so that even if some senior colleague makes such a request of them, they'll be in a position, one, to recognize that this request is wrong. Because it's one thing to recognize that what you're being asked to do is wrong, and another to accept to do the wrong thing. If we get sufficient people to recognize that certain things are wrong and unethical, it will be then to help to advise. Moses?
Okay, thank you very much. There was a little crack in the connection there, but thank you, Prof. Do we have anyone who would like to ask a question at this point in time? Yeah, Dr. Adeyanju, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Prof, for this wonderful presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for this very wonderful presentation. Mine is not a question, but it's just a kind of a contribution. And on one side, to the research team, and also to the rest of us. I think this topic for me, when I saw it, I really loved it, and I said, "Oh, I need to participate in the debate." I think it's a very big, wide area that I will advise the research team to continue with. Maybe take it like a series, okay, to bring in some other people on board to look at the other side of, because when we are talking of knowledge production, Prof mentioned something, especially as it has to do with the question of publishing in all these Western journals, Scopus, and so on and so forth. And also the question of sometimes for us trying to look at those publications within our schools in Nigeria or in other African countries, because I so much, I follow decolonization of knowledge. I so much believe in it, and I've been participating, strongly in it. It's not as if all the journals, published within our schools are actually bad. There are good ones, that I've seen. There are good papers that I've read. But the question is that when we look at the relationship between the global South and the global North, when it comes to knowledge production, we'll see that the global North seems to dictate things. Everything seems to tilt towards them, and they dictate what is the standard most of the time. So even for us as academics from the global South, even when we write and we see that we've written something very good, so sometimes it doesn't get, to see the light of the day. Anyway, and it is relative as well. It is relative in the sense that what is obtainable in the sciences might not be what we have. I'm from the social sciences, and I'm talking from the social science point of view. So basically what I'm saying is that when we are trying to look at the number of publications that you need to become a professor, or the question that people are publishing a lot, I think we are doing that, in the global South, because sometimes the platform, for us to publish in these journals, Scopus, Elsevier, and so on and so forth, we don't have access to the platform. So, and because we don't have access to the platform, because sometimes when we produce something good, it's not acceptable. So what I'm saying by and large is that I think the research team of the school should try, maybe also with time, bring another presentation that look at the question of knowledge production and the politics around knowledge production and how it affects how people produce, knowledge in Nigeria, and perhaps if we have people from other countries in Africa or global South that will be interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adeyanju, for that contribution. Prof,
Can I say something here, Moses?
Yes, go ahead, Prof.
Okay, yeah, Dr. Adeyanju, thank you so much for for your comments. Now, there are things that I'd like us to keep in mind. Yes, there's this thing about the politics of knowledge production between the global north and the global south. And sometimes when we deal with that subject, we deal with it in ways that I think are reactionary. For example, there is a book called The Heart of Darkness that is, typically racist. And Chinua Achebe decided to respond to that book, and he wrote Things Fall Apart. Now, if Things Fall Apart was not published by Heinemann, I am not sure anybody will talk about it today. The only way Things Fall Apart could engage the argument that Joseph Conrad was struggling with in The Heart of Darkness by trying to put Bachman down, the only way Achebe could do that was to engage Conrad on his own turf. The truth of the matter is, many times we mistake publishing houses for journals. There are many journals published in Africa and in the South that are published by Elsevier as a publishing house. There are many of them that are published by Sage, that are published by Macmillan, whatever it is. The good publishers also publish certain papers, certain journals that are domiciled, as it were, in Global South. And when you talk about Scopus, for example, Scopus simply does indexing of certain types of journals. And they index journals that are from everywhere that meet certain standards. And I understand that it is about who defines these standards. But for me, the way to engage a man who struggles to show that you are inferior is to show him that even in his own terms, he can't beat you. And then when you get to a certain level, you dictate the pace. Look at what China has done. Imagine what will happen if Chinese researchers insisted that they will publish their papers only in Chinese journals. China would not be taking over the research space the way they are doing now. And there's a journal called the Journal of Food Biochemistry. The impact factor of journal used to be less than 1. And that journal will not publish research from, let's say, the global south now, but typically research out of Africa, scarce could make it into that journal. Until a young gentleman called Rotimi Aluko worked his way up to the editorship of the journal and changed all that. And in changing it, papers from the African continent began to make their way into the journal on issue basis. And not just that, the impact factor of that journal has grown in geometric progressions. For me, Rotimi has been able to tell those from the global north who thought that those from the global south are not capable of the kind of intellectual rigor that is required, research and publishing, that, sorry, we can do this. We can even beat you in that turf. So my opinion would be that, no, we cannot make the mistake of saying that all the work done by our people are poor quality. Far from it. In fact, I believe that this should be about incremental progress. In a university, for example, to get to professor, you are required to publish only 4 papers in journals that have the impact, and 4 more in those that have the SJR, that's the Simago Journal Rank, or the Source Normalized Impact per paper. The others can be published anywhere. The idea is that if you are a professor in a Nigerian university, you should be a professor truly. It will be wrong to have someone who insists that because I want to show these people that we can do this thing, then all my papers have to be published around the Plateau, Benue, and Nasarawa axis, and then I can engage in a discussion with someone in Cameroon. So there's a lot of work to be done. Many of our people are doing top quality work. But the problem is that typically when it comes to writing up our papers for publication, we are a reflection of what we read. So if you read those papers based in those top journals, for example, you will find out that what some of our colleagues published or have or usually published in journals that are not known anywhere, as that if they were written in better language, better stylistics, they will make it into those journals. Okay, so there's a lot of work for us to do, even when it comes to basic things about keeping the journal alive, publishing periodically and consistently. Those are deficiencies that we must address and we can't shy away from. So yes, I agree. There's a lot of politics. In fact, I'll give a personal example. A manuscript I had written in 2012 with an affiliation, with a Nigerian affiliation, rejected by a journal. In 2013, when I was out of this country on some fellowship, I simply submitted that same manuscript with a different affiliation to the same journal, and it went through peer review and was eventually published. Yes, those things happen. But in Igbo, there's a saying, I gave you makambabu yalogo. Shall we, because people die, if there's a warfare, decide that our enemies should run, through us without offering any resistance? The way to offer resistance is to engage these people on their turf and not to shy away and build a wall around ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Barrera has a hand up. Would like to give you the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ejike. Very insightful, very interesting conversation. Just a follow or a build up of what you were talking about. I'm interested in publish or perish because I think we are dealing with the issue. I'm struggling, not to perish. So I wonder, how do we deal with this very ethical issues? And I think why people are engaging in this very unethical issue is because of the pressure from the universities, where you have to teach a lot of students. A lot of university activities away from research does not permit you to actually engage in serious research. And so that some colleagues end up lifting or taking over their students' their projects, and then they end up putting their names and not having their students. Though you supervise the student, I think it's still unethical. The thing is, how do we navigate this very, very busy or very demanding environment, research environment, so that we don't perish?
Thank you, Dr. Barra. You've raised a very fundamental issue. Truth of the matter is that most Nigerian universities are teaching universities that are pretending to be rich universities. And so we place premium on research when it comes to promoting, our staff, when in fact we know that we run teaching universities. Okay, like rightly pointed out, even from personal experience, there are times when you struggle to even update your lecture materials. Because you go from one meeting to another, you sit in one committee or the other, you have all sorts of administrative responsibilities. And then when you are through with all that, you could have 6 or more courses to teach in just one semester. And yet you are required to find time, to push. So I think there are different levels to deal with this. One is that universities should incentivize, the work people do that is not necessarily research. That's one, in my view. When people take on, for example, administrative responsibilities, universities should deliberately reduce their teaching loads so that they would have time to pay attention to research. That's one. Secondly, universities should take deliberate steps to de-emphasize quantity. there is no reason why someone needs 50 papers to get promotion to professorship. There's no reason for that. You know, in the sciences, people want something to be named after them. You know, in the humanities and social sciences, they want an idea to be named after them. You know, people should be encouraged to simply publish a few papers that will stand them out and not come with a carton load of things that are essentially rubbish. Okay, but at the individual level, you know, people should also take the responsibility for self-preservation in their hands. You know, by that I mean, when I see colleagues who jostle for administrative positions in the universities, I smile, especially when they are very young colleagues. You know, I smile because many times I wish they knew what they were doing to themselves. Okay? What I think colleagues should do is to invest their energies appropriately in the early days of their careers, so that the momentum they will gain getting to senior lecturer from a publication point may through. Otherwise, they will struggle. For colleagues in the humanities, particularly, for those in the social sciences, I truly do not sympathize with them when they complain, because in my view, they truly have nothing to complain about. You know, Nigeria has enough social challenges to make anyone very productive. You know, for those in the humanities, depending on the discipline, they could have certain challenges. By that I mean, for someone who is in, let's say, fine applied arts, and he's not in art history, if the person is in sculpture, the person may be carried away by creating sculptures and holding exhibitions, that he doesn't engage in the intellectual work that, you know, an artist who is also a researcher is expected to be engaged in. You know, for such colleagues, there is no point in insisting that they publish too many papers. But the insistence should be, however, that the papers they publish are top quality papers that can be presented anywhere globally. You know, so there are two layers in my view. Institutions should deliberately create policies that put premium on quality and not quantity. Then individuals should also take the necessary pains to think about their survival, so that early on, from their master's research and their PhD research, you know, they begin to put their feet on the steps of survival. Dr. Barrera, I must also mention that there are also some other activities that distract are not found in teaching, research, or community service. I do not know about Plateau State University, but I know that in many universities I've interacted with, you have colleagues who own shops in all the markets in town. You know, there are car dealers, the colleagues even sell crayfish, and you know, do all sorts of things. And then imagine that the reason they have not been promoted is because the university has placed them under some pressure, when indeed they are the ones who have also refused to apply themselves to the profession they had chosen or that was thrust on them. The other one is, I also know colleagues who are rarely sober. You know, unfortunately, my university doesn't have a staff club yet. So colleagues are not able to gather and drink beer or alcohol in the evening and banter as academics. You know, so they would go to beer parlors in town where they mingle with politicians and traders and people like that, and speak in loud voices and imbibe these things with the hydroxyl group. And the man returns home by 12 or 1 in the middle of the night, manages to get 4 hours of sleep, and is woken up by an angry wife who needs money, you know, to cook a decent meal the following day. And the man returns to the class in the morning, ill-prepared for his lecture, and remembers he has a series of meetings. He attends 4 meetings that day, is exhausted at the end of the day, and returns to the beer parlor, where he gets solace. And typically, those are the ones who are loudest when it comes to matters such as this. So there are demons that we need to exercise from ourselves, and then there are also systemic demons that collectively those involved in leadership should deal with. As a person, I sincerely do not see any reason why someone who has produced, a few top quality papers shouldn't gain promotion. Dr. Barrera, I don't know if I've made any useful comments.
Oh, sure you have. Thank you.
Moses, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry about that. Okay, let me thank you, Professor Ejike, for the response, and Dr. Barrera for the question. I will take the next question from Dr. Nadi, and Obiora will follow suit. That should be the last questions for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ejike. Mine is not a question, but just follow up. I'm happy we have our Director of Research here, and also Dr. Patience Ige is here, who's a council member, and several other PLASU staff are here. I don't know if there should be a follow-up with regards to what Professor Ejike recommended with the issue of the emphasizing on quantity of publication. I don't know if after this webinar, there should be something, a follow-up, follow-through. How do we engage with the system, university system, with regards to issues with regards to de-emphasizing on quantity and all of that, and incentivizing research and all of that. I know that Dr. Gay has also tried in a way, if you have administrative positions, they try to reduce the credit load you are carrying. But again, the university system is so full of responsibilities. You have this to handle, and all of that. So I think there should be a deliberate, either from the NUC point of view, trying to review generally the promotion criteria, or the university adapting something that works for us and encourages quality and emphasizing on quantity. I know most of us have gotten our institutional emails now, and I think it would be good if we go ahead to populate our Google Scholars, ResearchGate, and make ourselves visible as much as possible. So I don't know how we can follow through what's the issues that are coming up from this discussion, and lead a reform in the system. I know some of these reforms should be collective as much as possible, but I don't know what will be our follow. How we can follow this up after now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nadi. I think, just like you said, that was a comment, a food for thought, actually. So we can begin to think about the next step, or maybe the next strategy to recommend or implement. I'll leave that with the management. Thankfully, Dr. Ige is here, like you rightly mentioned. So I'll give this floor to Obiora, who will ask our last question for the day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the chance of giving the last question. And my question is just simple. Research is expensive, especially for people in the sciences. If you are to get reagents and ethical clearance, all these things are expensive and time consuming. After you have given, sorry for the flashback, please, my children are at it. What I'm actually saying is that, okay, when you finish and you write a top-notch paper and you want to send it to a very good journal, and now we are at the age of open access, and open access is expensive. So if they get to accept your paper and they charge you £1,200 or $1,500, which is essentially for a person that is a senior lecturer and below, it is like 6 months of their salary. So how can you, as a researcher in your bid to be visible and to make impact, you now use 6 months salary to publish one paper? And you know now the emphasis is still on quantity, not on quality. So my problem is, how do we go about this? In that most of the time, we are not granted, we don't have money to do research. You do research from your mega salaries. Then, if you take example from what is happening in other places, even in Africa, I know colleagues in South Africa that their university, they have this policy that just publish in very good journals and make our university visible. At the end of the year, you are refunded. You know, they pay you back the money you spent publishing, because on the long run, when they rate the universities, it is these works, these research works that emanate from the universities that are, that are used to rate these universities. So what are we going to do about this issue of, high cost of publication, especially if you want to publish in open access journals? Then if you want other very good journals that are not open access, apart from the rigor of the review system, when you publish there, nobody gets to see it. You understand? It's it is blocked by a paywall, and so many people cannot afford to pay that amount of money for a paper, no matter how good it is. So, Prof, what do you think we can do about this? Thanks.
Thank you, Obiora. Before I respond to Obiora's question, moderator, please permit me to have the opportunity to thank some of my friends who found time to join this discussion. I found out that someone very dear to me, my former Vice Chancellor, joined in. Professor Wajuba, thank you. I also have, this brother, Boko, who is joining from Germany. Dr. Ugu, thanks for joining. I also saw that Dr. Ifeanyi Nwachukwu joined us from the US. Dr. Chinyere Loke joined from South Africa. And some of my colleagues, our Dean of Humanities, Charles, Dr. Nyeneke, and Dr. Nwankwo also joined. Thanks, friends, please, for joining. Obiora, to your question. Yes, research is expensive. Nothing good comes easy. And then, not just that research is expensive, it also becomes expensive to publish. Indeed, many people feel that publishers kind of fleece authors, because you do the work, you write the manuscript, and then they make the money. Okay, and all you get is some listing on your CV, XYZ. So it is expensive, I agree. But that if it is simply about, I tell colleagues, Obiora, you would remember, there's this gentleman, Theophilus Anoliefo, who had designed a very elegant master's degree project. And the day he presented it, the day he presented his proposal, everyone concluded that this was a project for a Nobel Prize and not a project for a master's degree. I am not sure if and when he completed that master's degree. Okay, colleagues should note that part of surviving is also engaging in research that is doable within your environment. And there is a lot that you can do. In fact, all you need to do is just look at the Sustainable Development Goals. You don't need to go very far, irrespective of the field. There will be something around you that you can do. Now, the truth is that there is a lot of grant money out there that we are still unable to access because of personal and institutional deficiencies. The TED Fund institutional-based research is one easy way of getting money to support some research. It is, however, the responsibility of colleagues who run institutions and the organs of our universities to make sure that these funds are accessed, utilized, and retired so that subsequent ones can be accessed. We once had a case of a colleague who wanted to work on cowpea. He was working on its vegetative roots, and he got the first tranche of research, planted the cowpeas, and before he got the second tranche of research, the cowpeas had grown, were harvested already, and they feel cleared for the next planting season before he got the next tranche of research to then get to the meat of the matter. So you also have, even when the funds are available, you have systems within our universities that are not as streamlined as you expect, and these militate against our work. So I think universities should make sure that even that TED Fund IBR that comes, the problem is in universities accessing them because of the protocol that, in my view, are not even very difficult to meet. That would be a good place to start, and the university can identify those who make the necessary progress and then support them. I believe that by now, every Nigerian university should have an office responsible for research and development, and such offices should have staff who are professionals who can help when it comes to grants writing and things like that. When it comes to public, another thing that we can also do is to collaborate, to collaborate. There are many grants that are available to people. Let me borrow the language of, I think it's Dr. Deanju, people in the global north who need to do some work, but need collaborators from the global south. That's also an opportunity, but you need to show evidence that you're capable of something small before you can begin to hope to get something big. Okay, when it comes to publishing, as a person, I believe the model you mentioned works, and there is absolutely no reason Nigerian universities should not adopt it. Indeed, the monies that go into things that you may consider frivolous can actually fund them exercises like that. There is no reason Nigerian universities should not pay the article processing charges for papers in top quality journals, when the manuscripts are accepted by the authors. Indeed, some South African universities will not only pay for the paper, but also give you credits that you can use, only to attend conferences, for example, or related to your research. So you could have in Naira, you could have 1 million Naira credits, but you can only access it if you're going to attend the conference or you're going to attend the workshop or something like that. Universities should do that. And sincerely speaking, it's a no-brainer. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that. And if we did that, the universities would be the better for it. All the university needs to do is to create mechanisms that ensure that the journal that the paper is a good quality journal, and the university pays for it. I also tell colleagues that, the problem with publications that are hidden behind paywalls is for those of us in, again, I'll use the term, the global south. For our counterparts in North America and in Europe, their universities pay subscription fees for these journals. I agree that for many Nigerian universities, the subscription fees for journals published by Elsevier may be more than the university's budget for a year. And they may not be able to do that for now. But I also know that there are, if you have friends for example, you'll be able to get whatever paper you want. By that I mean that Dr. Ugu, for example, is in a university in Germany. That university is most likely, going to or would have subscribed to many of these outlets. So if I need a PDF of a paper, I simply mail the web link to Dr. Ugu and plead with him nicely to send me the PDF, and he will download it and send the PDF to me. And I'm not sure he will be breaking any laws if he did that. Again, almost on a daily basis, I send personal mails to authors of paper, and in fact, 2 days ago, on the 2 days ago, yes, on this matter of publish and perish, I sent an email to someone who had seen a full-length paper, on publish and perish, and immediately I clicked send. I received the mail, so I thought the mail had failed, but it was the man, and he said, here it is. He simply sent the PDF, because the truth is people want to be cited. So the man is that if he sends you his paper or her paper, and you read, you're going to cite him likely, and he won't be cited because we live in an age of scientometry. People are bothered about their citation counts and things like that. If you don't have, if you don't have an H index of a certain number, people don't take you very seriously. If you have a certain number of citation counts, people don't take you and things. So it is possible for us to have access to these papers. And please, honest opinion, for every journal that is open access, there will be an equivalent that is not open access. If you don't find funds to publish in an open access journal, my brother, publish in the one that is not open access. I will not advise anybody to spend 6 months' salaries to publish one paper. If your wife is not patient, she may divorce you, and your family will stand behind her.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ejike, for such elaborate explanation, particularly responses in regards to the issues raised by Obiora. And I think if I could just make a quick comment, the little idea about contacting colleagues who are schooling in institutions that have access to these journals, I think is quite important. I remember that I have also downloaded quite a number of articles from my university here in the UK, and I've sent it to colleagues back home who are publishing, who are working on certain research, and they've requested for that. But because I know with my student ID, I can have access to nearly unlimited access to resources, particularly in relation to articles, I've done that. I think colleagues can do that as well. So thank you very much for bringing this to light. I will invite Dr. Barira or Dr. Patience again to comment on the issues of going forward in relation to that research strategy. But before I do that, I would like to give, we're quite privileged to have the former Vice Chancellor here with us in our mission. I'd like to give him maybe the floor to say 1 or 2 words before we go on. The former Vice Chancellor.
So, Professor Wajuba, has he exited? Can't find him again.
All right. Okay.
I think he has left. I think he's left.
Right. Okay. We have Non-Yalum. Can you just make your comments very brief before Dr. Barira or Dr. Patience make the final comment and the closing remark, please? Thank you.
Non-Yalum, you have the floor, please.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Just a quick one. I'm sorry I joined late for the webinar. My question is on this issue of publish or perish. We tend to come across lots and lots of predatory journals. how do we know which of these journals are predatory? Because in one of the webinar I attended last year, organized by Elsevier, they were like, if you keep climbing in your career and then you come to a point where you want to publish in a good journal like say Nature, and then they will have to go run through your records and see if you have published in predatory journals. And if you have, they will likely not accept your paper. So I would like to know, how do one know which and which of those journals is a predatory one? Thank you.
Professor Ejike, would you like to comment on that as well? It seems Professor Ejike is having network issues. Can anyone respond to the question on the floor? Professor Ejike is off completely. It seems he has issues relating to network. Okay, Professor Ejike is back. You are muted, but did you hear the question?
Question, please. Could you please recast?
Okay. If I get the question,
I missed the question. Please repeat it.
Okay, I think the question Nonyelin was asking was in relation to identifying which journals are predatory journals, how we can identify it because of its possible impact on your publications, on your perhaps recognition in the future. So identifying those journals, how can we do that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There are, in my view, there are two types of predatory journals. There are those that are plain predatory. You don't need any skill to identify them. You'll simply know that, this is not it. In 2014, I was teaching a master's class, and I wanted to show them, the problems with some open access journals. And so, in front of the students, I created a manuscript, and sent this to, a certain publisher, with very stupid names and, hopeless title, one that any sensible person will immediately read and recognize that, look, this is nonsense. And by the time we returned the following day, I had an email asking me, to pay $100 that the thing had been accepted. Those ones are not difficult to, to know. You'd immediately, just by visiting the journal's website, you'll know that this is predatory. However, for some, it could be a little more complex. And there are resources out there, that helps. The librarian called BL, so there's a BL's list of predatory journals. Okay, you can simply Google it. There's a BL's list of predatory, and once in a while, the list is updated. If you go through the list, there are both predatory journals and predatory publishers. If you go through the list, then you should avoid them. That's one. Second one is, as much as possible, please submit your manuscripts to only known, standard publishers or journals based in universities or research institutes. So it's either they are based in universities or research institutes, or they are society journals. Okay, so don't send your manuscripts to people who simply have a laptop and internet access and some web address, and then they simply collect a few, $100 dollars or pounds, and then they put the paper up on some website and claim it's been published. Okay. For I think that's it. It's Beall's list. I think it's BEALL, then apostrophe S. You know, if you Google it, you'll find it. And it's a whole list of predatory journals and predatory publishers. As much as you can, please avoid the journals on that list, and that will help.
Okay, thank you so much.
Nanyalum, did you get that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the floor is open to either Dr. Barrera or Dr. Patience to respond to one or two of the issues raised by Dr. Nadi and Obiora and give the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Professor Ejike. We appreciate the directorate, appreciate your time. I know that you are busy. Thank you for this very insightful presentation. I believe that this will lead to a series of conversations within the directorate as well as the university. In response to all that has been said, the directorate is really working hard to see how it can address some of the issues that colleagues have as regard to research and publishing, and that's why we have this constant, we have started or initiated this webinar series so that we can assist. We are planning on having a workshop, another workshop next month for grant writing. So we're going to be having series of events to help colleagues. The university also, I think the Vice Chancellor is also planning on supporting research in the university. We had meetings with him. Another dimension is the Pro-Chancellor has very wonderful ideas. He's open to also assist us in the university in terms of linkages and opening opportunities for colleagues. So in light of this challenge, this global pandemic that has affected of course, resources. We know that we are dealing with very tight and dwindling resources, but we hope that we can navigate, one step to the next step gradually. So I believe that this year we are going to be having series of events to help us. That is it. We also, as a directorate, we are going to be exploring other opportunities with other corporations in Nigeria as well as outside Nigeria to see how we can help improve or deepen research and resources for research in the university. So on this note, I want to thank everyone for making our time to attend. I ask that we constantly avail ourselves. This is only encouraged, not only the speaker, but also the directorate as we keep pushing at this webinar series and other events that we'll be having to help the university improve research profile. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend and Salah break. Thank you all and see you soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barrera, and thanks again to everyone. We deeply appreciate you taking time, making time to be with us this evening. And yes, have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.